All right, so we're going over chapter 7 now. What I meant for us to read the chapter on Steiner, and a lot of people also read the one on the land of Shambala. So I think people started their questions there. We'll start with that. I don't think we'll get all the way through what is chapter 8 actually on Steiner, but that's a 40-page chapter, so maybe we could break it up into 2 sessions. Does that sound
Absolutely.
good?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. I'll start off. Now, I have you say in Shambhala, or like the New Jerusalem, or the Garden of Eden Reborn, that there's a sort of a magnetic connection between the earth and the sun, electromagnetic connection. And I'm wondering if you could say something about the electromagnetic forces as compared to the ethers. I've always understood that the electromagnetic forces are fallen forces, and the gravity of the ethers have levity to them. Could you just contrast them?
I would be happy to. And in the book is one of the few places that you can get the foundation for that. But to go the next step, you have to understand that there is terrestrial electromagnetism and cosmic electricity. So the way that Steiner points it out is that there's 3 forces. One of the forces is, he just calls it electric, and the other one is an electromagnetic, and the other one is the 3rd force. And these forces are made by human beings, and they are in fact pulling angels, archangels, and archai beings out of their natural condition into the world and using them, imprisoning them actually, into, for instance, electromagnetism. Let's just take, for instance, copper wire. They have compressed the natural electrical nature of archangels and compressed it into wire and kept it there through magnetism. And so it gets very complicated. And we've just done a new book called The Mystery of Life Found in Plasma, because once you understand the ethers, you have to add the component of plasma, which is electricity, but that's good electricity. It's good electrostatic energy, and it's outside of the earth. Let's just call it at this moment. It's outside of the earth. It's outside of the 7 atmospheres of the earth, out into the exosphere. Out in that realm, that type of electricity always has magnetism along with it. And so the big distinction here by Steiner's ether and Steiner's ether theory, which is an ancient theory, which was in the chapter before, the chapter on Shambhala, that demonstrates that. That's the reason I put it in the book. Rama Prasad's book at that time was the most popular book in theosophy because people used it because you can heal yourself with it, or you can do great harm with it, because it's absolutely true. And it teaches the manipulation of the ethers, which we only now through science know some of the facts that back some of these things up. And so if you were to read, as you read that chapter, you probably went, what's Svarva? What is prana? Why is there cosmic prana? Why is there earthly prana? Why is there these 2 distinctions? That's because what happens here on Earth is less than 1% of the whole universe. And what happens outside of that, even though the ethers, the etheric formative forces are creating those things, there are also cosmic forces there that are not in the earth. And those cosmic forces are plasma. And they're good electricity, we'll call it. They're electrostatic energy, which is what controls all the dark matter, what they call dark matter, which there is none. Those are plasma clouds of dust. And then it controls basically everything in the cosmos. Our whole sun is all plasma. Lightning bolts is plasma. Comet tails are plasma. The ozone is plasma. The ionosphere is plasma. And so they're all invisible electrical forces that are not controlled or manipulated by earth forces. So you have to make that clear distinction there. So you're absolutely right in assuming that there's 2 different forces going on with just the 4 ethers. There's 5 ethers down here, but you can't see the Akasha. And we could talk all day about the Akasha ether. But the 4 ethers, warmth, light, sound, and life, down here can be manipulated. And light, sound, and life can be taken down into electrostatic, electromagnetic, electrogravitational forces, which Steiner calls the third force. I am now, because I put it out in the book, and I know that this is true, that is what Steiner was talking about. And I've demonstrated it in this new book. So Steiner was talking about a force he didn't want us to know about, because in 1879, when plasma was discovered, they didn't understand that there was a distinction between cosmic electricity and electromagnetic forces on the Earth. Same thing with plasma. They create plasma balls all the time. They have 1,000 ways to work with plasma in every field now, and no one knows about it, do they? That's because they don't want it regulated. Same thing with the ethers. They know all about the ethers, but they can't understand it because their thinking can't go there. And for sure, you can't go there when you take the step from being on the Earth into the realm of the sun or towards the sun, because then all the plasma out there, it's not in space, it's non-space, it's zero space, according to Steiner, and it is non-material. It can pass right through solid objects. It can live forever if it wishes to, because they are forces. They are not necessarily beings. They're not biological beings, these plasmoids that we see dropping from the clouds, thousands of them now. I've literally seen thousands of people's phone pictures of plasma balls dropping from the cloud, and then what happens? Usually there's a UFO chasing it, right? And they never have caught a plasmoid in its natural state because it isn't physical. Same thing with the ethers. Warmth, light, sound, and life are not physical forces. They are energies that affect physical forces, but they're driven by the donations of beings. So the next question is, did certain beings donate the plasma in the cosmos, which was then basically the substance that was then, as it comes in, as you pointed out, Bruce, at the North Pole, where the magnetism is the strongest, that's where plasma is drawn out of the plasmasphere through into our atmosphere, into what we'd call the thermosphere, where it gets to be 6,000 to 10,000 degrees hot, and plasmoids turn what is called cosmic helium into oxygen and cosmic hydrogen into water. So all life on Earth came from water and oxygen. But it came through an electrical process without any gravity. There's no such thing as gravity. And Steiner's theory, at that time, he had to cloak and hide some of the things that he was saying about plasma. And I wanted to say this today. I'm so glad your first question was exactly on that point, is that as you're reading this chapter on the ethers by Steiner, those are principles. I extracted those from unbelievable amounts of his work into very dense principles. So you can't just read it like a novel. You have to read it as if it is a scientific book, and each one is a principle. And each one of those principles can be explained and applied and can be proven and demonstrated to be true. But the problem is, in every case, whether you're looking at the manifestation of, remember, warmth and light ether, rays out. It gets very, very confusing. Warmth and light ether, rays out, right? Chemical, sound, and life ether contracts. It doesn't really contract, it sucks, according to Steiner. So inside of the sun, as you read, the sun sucks. It's a null point. It's what they call now 0 point physics, or they have a bunch of different names for it. And he literally uses those names. He was the first person to point this out. Matter of fact, I wanted, out of all of this, to make sure that you noticed that this is just one of the many, 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 many times that Rudolf Steiner has predicted things that have come now into modern parlance, and science has accepted it as being true. And that's called 0 point sphere. He says, the spherical form is the synthesis of all polyhedral shapes and of all crystalforms. And then he says, of course, everything that changes has to go through being a sphere, including every drop of rain, which has to be frozen, be a crystal, be melted, turn into a sphere, and drop down to the earth. But that's only part of the water process. There's 7 heavens, and we only look at the first heaven. And so we look at the climate processes and think that that's something that we understand, and we don't. Those are, in fact, the higher hierarchies working through climate. All 9 hierarchies work through climate processes. And it all comes down to the male-female plus or minus according to atomic theory. But in here he says, when substance passes from fluid to gas, the diffusion and dissolution of the spherical form is directed outward. That's what happens to you every time you sleep. That's what happens when you die. And so this form is passing into a negative only, passing through the sphere. And through a 0 point or the zero sphere, gas or air is a negative form. Air is a negative form. If you don't stop and think about each one of these phrases, you're writing a whole new science with what Steiner has given us about the ethers and about plasma, though he only uses the word plasma a few times. So spatial and non-spatial are pressure and suction, respectively. And if you understand that, you understand the whole universe. You understand the universe, you understand how things were created down here because we're a small microcosmic version of the macrocosm. And the same thing happening on the whole earth is happening in your body. And the same thing happening on the earth is happening in the sun. And what the sun does, and you mentioned this, aren't you asking about magnetic reconnection? Isn't that really your question, Bruce? You wanted
the sun and Shambala, there's a magnetic connection with the sun. That's why it's at the north.
Now, I don't know where you got that question because that's not explicit in this book, but I've been working that a lot. I want to ask a question of you teachers. I can say to you, one of the most important things you can do right now as a teacher is to listen to the telepathy tapes. Have any of you heard of or listened to the telepathy tapes? Okay. This is a study. What's that?
Scotty said that he had heard of it, and I said, well, I heard of it from Scotty. So it's going around.
Take the time to find the one that's the video. There's 10 tapes, and those take a long time to listen to. Get the video, and it will prove to you that nonverbal autistic children are 100% clairvoyant, telepathic, and they go to a place at night or in the daytime if they can get quiet. They can go meet their friends. These are nonverbal. They have to point at letters on a board or type on a computer. It takes them a long time to learn this. But once they do, they've found that 10% of them are savants. They're the most brilliant people on the face of the earth. And we know this in curative education with Waldorf because we're taught it's an honor to serve these children because they're great masters and great beings reincarnated who took on this suffering. And so we always thought, yeah, that's very nice. And I believed it, but I didn't believe it like this. Once you learn that when you're not verbal, telepathy is as natural as breathing, then that gets you ready to understand what plasma is. And so you say, how can non-physical stuff, which we think is physical, turned into the physical earth? That's all explained in this new book. And it's also explained partially in the next chapter on Gunther Wachsmuth's version that Steiner approved of his presentation of the etheric formative forces. It's in there, but you just have to look very, very closely. And in the new book that I'm doing, it's actually at the printer, it'll be out anytime. It goes through each principle and shows you how plasma is related to that. So electromagnetic plasma is not anything like electromagnetism that's man-made. And if you notice those balls, those are plasma balls that have dropped from the sky. You've seen them. The red ones and the blue ones from the volcanoes, the blue ones from earthquakes, the red ones from water and oceans, the gold ones and the white ones in the sky. You can now see literally tens of thousands of these on the internet, okay? Because why? We started doing some plasma experiments that literally led me to be able to write this book. Because before this, the book Plasma, what I knew about it, I didn't think I was supposed to talk about it. But I can talk about it now because they've already made the weapons. They've made literally 100 different medical, what they call breakthrough medicine treatments with it. And what it is it's working with parts of the etheric formative forces. For instance, Rudolf Steiner point blank says, I might even have the quote here. He says that everything in the primal cosmos was created from plasma, including the sun, the earth, humans, and the realm of archetypes. Now, I haven't figured out that one yet. I have some theories. I'm not sure what he means by that. But he also says your skin is plasma. There's plasma in your blood. He says that when lightning and thunder happens, that is plasma in your blood and plasma in your thoughts, acting as lightning and thunder in your body. And he also says there's plasma in your germ cells. So there's all kinds of plasma in us, and nobody wants to talk about that. But they now have medical treatments that can treat it. So the point is, what this stuff is that we are sharing, I have to acknowledge your courage to face having to change everything that you've ever been told about science or the physical world, because in fact it is what the ancient Indians called illusion. Maya, it is actually what they thought was delusion. It will delude you. But if you understand the genesis of matter, and you understand the way that we try to replicate it with all of our man-made devices, which are absolutely purely evil, Rudolf Steiner says there's not a speck of electricity that is not evil. Okay? I have to keep repeating this to people because they say, well, he said there's going to be moral technology, so it's okay. No, it's not okay. Every speck of it that you were exposed to, you need to antidote. Now, Shambala is the round halo that we call, it's the base of where the aurora borealis happens. It's it's near the North Magnetic Pole, but now that that's shifted, it's near just the North Pole, and it rotates above. I've been there. When you're in the Arctic, it's an oval, and when it rotates, so at some point it'll come over you, and when you're inside of that, you're inside of what's called the White Island or Shambala, if you could go up into it. Because every single night, every one of us goes into our heart, comes out our head, and goes up through, even if you're in Australia, you still go through the North Pole, right through that circle into the spiritual world if you are developed enough to do that. If you're not, you're held back by the guardian of the threshold, which is really the ion stream of the aurora borealis, which is really the sword of the cherubim, according to Rudolf Steiner, and also the light of Michael, the archangel. So every night, these children go to a place they call the hill. And when they're on the hill, they can talk to any great teacher they want from any period of time you want. You could say, tonight, child who does this, go talk to Socrates, come back in the morning, I want to ask you a few questions. The child will go and completely understand Socrates and come back and answer all your questions. And the child can't read. Technically, the child actually supposedly is not having any cognitive capacities, but they have super capacities. And every night they go to what Steiner called the Mother Lodge, the White Brotherhood, the White Island, others called Tushita Heaven, Mount Meru, Shambhala. There's 1,000 names for it. The Halls of Wisdom. Some would say this is the walking through the Halls of Wisdom into the Akashic Records. So all of us do that. And where did Rudolf Steiner say you're supposed to connect with your children? Every night in that realm. And ask of their angels, because as you do your meditation before you go to sleep, you envision each child and you look at their spirit, and then you go to sleep and you leave an open question and you go to sleep. And from that realm, you are given guidance by their angels to tell you what that child needs. How many times have you prepared a lesson and you woke up in the morning and you go, I'm not going to teach that lesson. I'm going to teach this lesson that just came to me from the children's angels. And that's what real teaching is all about. And that's when you contact the etheric, because this is the living etheric body of the earth where the plasma from the sun, and I can go into great detail about this because I love this. This is Christ's breath. This is the solar breath breathing into the earth, giving us our life. And it literally is lungs. The plasmasphere are lungs that breathe with the breath of the sun. And magnetic reconnection that you're talking about, in one flash of a second, 93 million miles, the magnetic rope, they call it a magnetic flux rope, connects the Earth's magnetosphere with the sun. And Rudolf Steiner said we are pulled behind the sun by a cable tow. And this cable tow is exactly this magnetic flux transfer point rope that is pulling us behind every 8 minutes. So every 8 minutes, the sun is breathing into us, into our earth environment. What he calls the earth is the atom. It's the perfect monad. There's no atoms. Atoms are an illusion of science down here on the earth. They don't work in space. There's no atoms out there. That's why they call it cosmic hydrogen, cosmic helium. They're just ions. And most of the things they see are just ions, or they'll tell you most of it's all dark matter. No, that's plasma in a resting state where it doesn't glow, and it's dust. And these are the protoparticles that all creation comes from. So as you're reading this, do not be put off by the fact that the concepts are hard to handle and you can't get through that chapter because you would have to do what is called unlearning. You first must unlearn what you have been taught. What you were told was truth is a lie, and you have to unlearn it. Well, that's one of the most difficult forms of learning is unlearning.
Good. No, all right. That was one question, and we've done half our session with you. So I want to give other people a chance to ask questions. But thank you for that, Douglas. That was very, very thorough and cosmic and earthly all at the same time. Other people with questions, and can you come around and like show yourself to the camera? If not, you're just going to hear my questions. Here comes Nikki. Okay.
Hello.
Hello, Nikki. What do you teach?
I teach fine arts and relational arts in high school.
Beautiful.
I was the one that had that list of 7 questions, very practical questions last time. Thank you for answering those. I really appreciate it. In what you just shared, you said something about Steiner hid the principles in his work, and you said that there was like a condensed list of principles. Would you list the principles for us that he stated or hid in the work?
Make me pick a time.
Yes, I wasn't clear enough. What I was saying is in that chapter, the chapter on Rudolf Steiner and the ethers, those are principles extracted from every single place that I could extract a different view of him describing the ethers, because from the different points of view, it sounds different, but they're the same principle. So as you're reading through those, it's not light reading. It's very difficult. It's like reading a science textbook. And so what you are trying to accomplish is getting at least 12 different views of what Steiner says the ethers are. And then you can get it. And so those are the principles, Nikki. That's what I was trying to say. Those are the principles. And then in Voxmuth, I did the same thing. I condensed this impossible to read book into principles that I tried to make them sensible for people to understand.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
You say, this is in the 7th or the 8th chapter now, you say the ethers rise from the environment, their effect runs counter to that of Earth's gravitation. They create levity. I've always wondered, for instance, how a tree can get water higher than 33 feet above the ground, because that's the suction or whatever the scientific explanation is. It doesn't work above 33 feet. And Steiner said something about levity. Can you explain what he meant about levity? Because on another level here, we just had daylight savings time, and the kids like dragged themselves in yesterday, and they seem to be totally under the control of gravity. And how can you induce levity in your students or in your environment?
Great question. I'm afraid the answer may be as long as the first answer, Bruce. I'm sorry. You see these trees behind me? These trees, by science, they can't grow that tall because the sap can't go up there because all their math fails. about halfway up these trees. These are sequoia trees, right? So science can't explain much of anything. So how does it get up there? Here's what Steiner says. The sun is sucking, and it sucks the little plant towards itself. And you go, well, that seems kind of animistic and simplistic. No, not when you find out that the sun is a white hole, and it's not anything that science says. It's not a dense mass of plasma burning at superheat in the middle. No, it's a hole in the middle. And what's it a hole to? It's a hole into the spiritual world. And it's kind of like I was reading just today. It's like the eye of God and the ear of God listening. And so it's sucking to it. It's giving out at the same time that it's sucking to it and organizing. It's giving out. So warmth and light ether are levity. It gets a little complicated when you talk about how that appears in the human body. So I may try to dodge that for a minute. But warmth and light, it's the warmth that draws forth the plant. They won't come up without warmth. It is the light that draws forth the plant. And in that light, we don't even get all the life that comes from the sun. Half of the light that comes from the sun never reaches us. It creates the ozone. Without that, we'd all die. That's O2. O3, excuse me. Oh, I'm really getting confused. I should know this. Anyway, ozone is a form of oxygen, and then we have the oxygen we breathe, right? That is, in fact, in the light, you have much, much, much more than just light. And in warmth, you have much, much more than warmth. Warmth is a doorway between dimensions. And light has so many powers that it actually has created space by its inwardness. So when you're talking about light, light knew that it had to create an ozone shield for us that is literally a sphere that protects us from the light. And so part of light does not come down to us. And if it did, it would be very dangerous. But look at the sun. It's giving out warmth and light, and then they don't know it, but they would call it, scientism would call it, magnetism and gravity, or electromagnetism and gravity come from the sun. But it gives out a billion times more than that. It gives out rays we don't even know about. It gives out gamma rays. It gives out near infrared, far infrared, ultraviolet. It gives out everything. And most of it we can't handle. So light from the sun rays out. And as it's raying out in all directions, and its warmth is raying out in all directions, that's levity. Now, gravity, as I've said, is not what scientists say. It actually has everything to do with sound ether and life ether. But if something doesn't have proper form, and for instance, if the earth doesn't have a proper atmosphere, there can't be any life here. So the suctional forces of sound ether, which controls not only water, but it also controls all valence between atoms, what combines, what doesn't, what ionizes, what doesn't. And it's also the harmony of the spheres. And the reason that we're alive is because we have 7 organs, the heart being the sun organ, and 6 other organs below our chest, that in fact are keeping the same resonance of the sun and the 6 planets in our solar system. We are an exact copy of that. And it appears on the surface of our organs as memory, or one could literally say as plasma. But anyway, the point is the warmth and light is levity, and it goes out. Sound and life contract and they suck down. But that happened a long time ago, that the earth was sucked into a form that then had to go through many, many, many metamorphoses until it could turn into life. And if you have life ether, then you have sound ether, light ether, and warmth ether. But you can have those other 3, separate or in combinations below. But life ether takes everything. And so life ether is almost the most inexplicable, unimaginable, and illogical, improbable, almost impossible thing to arise in the universe. Notice they haven't found it anywhere else, have they? They've only found it here. And so when we look at a child, and we know that Rudolf Steiner says that child's skin is plasma, that their heart is driven by a plasmatic magnetohydrodynamic generator, that lightning is in their blood. How many of you have children who have lightning in their blood? I have a grandson who does. And it literally is. We kept saying, where did the battery come from for this 3-year-old to have infinite energy? Lightning in the blood. And of course, if they're pre-speech, then they have all kinds of capacities. And remember, the ethers, Christ is in the ether of the earth, and he's in Shambala. Okay, so Christ is there with the 12 bodhisattvas teaching them on this island. And we go there every night. It's just that we're not conscious enough to understand it. These children understand it, these nonverbal autistic children, and they have infinite capacities. That means we have infinite capacities. So almost everything I'm saying is basically to encourage you to understand that what you're doing is the most important thing you can do in the universe. If you can help one child, you are changing the universe that someday they'll be in charge of, because we all eventually grow in a long time, to beings who are in charge of these things, because these things aren't complicated. The things I'm explaining, they're complicated to humans because we're all confused and upside down, inside out, and backwards. But in terms of the big picture, it comes down to male and female. I always like to say female and male, actually. And that's negative and positive. And that's what all plasma is. It's ionized protons and electrons that have yet to form into anything. So they start creating electricity, and then they create spiraling electricity. Then it spirals back on itself, and then they create structures that are literally multi-dimensional fusion reactors that can transform one substance into the next. So do human beings. Every child in your class, in their enteric nervous system, in their gut, which is the smartest part of you and them. That's why Steiner said, no need teaching them Waldorf education if you don't give them good nutrition, right? In your gut there are more nerves than in your spinal cord and your brain combined. And that is a whole nervous system. And your heart then comes second, and then your brain, and then your spinal cord, then your brain. And those are all plasma. All that nerve activity, as well as much of the blood activity, is all plasma. And plasma is a form that when it's down here, because etheric formative forces only really become substance creating, condensing material down here in this realm of the earth. So there's plasma down here that doesn't act like plasma out there. And so the good news is we're going to become like these plasmoid beings we see that seems to have they're not bound by gravity or electromagnetism. Steiner says it's the realm of the archetypes, therefore they know everything. The recorded archetypes of even human beings and or the archetypes of these processes I'm describing are inscribed into plasmoids, obviously, and or plasmic cells in the plasmosphere, because he says that it's all there. The realm of the archetypes is there, but it's in a realm that's just beyond our reach, called the tree of life. And it has to be beyond our reach, because what would we do if we got a hold of it? We'd do what we did to the tree of knowledge of good and evil, which was warmth and levity, and we turned it into nuclear energy. If we get a hold of sound and chemical, which is chemical ether, and life ether, we'll turn it into plasma weapons, which they already have. So what we need to do is realize that the antidote to that is every single child you teach. If you can link up their 3 sources of energy in their body, in their gut, in their heart, and in their head, through their actions and their activity in their limbs, which is their skin, this is plasma, then you are in fact giving them liberation that builds a new world, as this old world drops into entropy and the cold, dark death of a winding down clock, is what they say. But remember, we go beyond that. Science is oftentimes partially true. And then the last part they add is grossly in error.
Great. Okay, so we have 10 minutes. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask about the chapters? We're looking at a discussion coming up right after we sign off with you. We're talking about a class that might have to be split apart next year of 4th and 5th grade. We might send the 5th graders to the middle school, This is a class of about 13 students. And this class has been together as like 2 grades for about 3 or 4 years. Do you have any thought on like the etheric sheath that forms around the class? Would that rupture the sheath if we were to basically split this class between 2 other classes? Does that...
Yes, I understand. That all comes down to the teachers, Bruce. It all comes down to the teachers. So if you have the right teacher, no problem. If you don't, then it's a good time to do it. 5th grade is actually a time to make a transition at the end of 5th grade. So if you're intending sending 5th graders up to 6th grade, that's not bad of an idea, but I would make sure that those who are still 4th graders have their 4th grade change. Now, you know how to look for a 4th grade change, right? I mean, that's what you're dealing with here. You just don't want to put children who are in their, what Steiner calls the 9-10 year change, into the golden year of childhood, into a group of children who have the golden year of childhood, 5th grade. So 4th grade ends in the war of all against all, basically. It ends in the twilight of the gods, all the gods dying except a couple of them, one who was Christ, and then Hennig, their representative of Christ, and then a few children. So this is what the children have to go through. You have to see whether or not they have done, which can be done by someone who's able to assess this. You can determine who should go up and who should go down, and or who should go together, and whether or not they would be torn to pieces by their class being separated, which, yes, those are very real considerations. But what's happening to the 2 teachers in 4th and 5th grade would be my first question. Second off, who's going to determine if there have to be children who can't make it by going up, because some can't, and it's not a good thing to send them up if they can't make it. If they can, there's nothing harming them to do that. I've seen children advance where we had to put 5th graders up into the high school to teach Riemannian physics to the high schoolers. I mean, you can do that, but you just have to know what you're doing. So what causes the 4th? What are the evident signs of a 9-year, 10-year change? Have they rejected their parents? Have they rejected their teacher? Have they said they're going to commit suicide? Have they tried to run away from home? These are all indicative of that age. And if they've done that, then they're ready to go on. And what they usually do, you'll notice this. I loved it when my 4th graders one day came up and said to me, my brightest student said, Mr. Gabriel, I don't understand why you never taught me how to do math. My sister had to teach it to me last night. You should be ashamed of yourself. And I'm like, well, I've been teaching math all along. She had to learn it from someone else. So a change at that grade, once they've attained the 9-10 year change, is not bad. But before that, it can be a bit of a shock to them. And then they may believe that, they die in the twilight of the gods instead of they go across the new Rainbow Bridge.
Yeah. The 4th, 5th grade teacher is leaving, and the 8th grade is heading towards the high school. And the thought is that those 5th graders would be part of a 6-7, but the 4th graders might be part of a 4-5. So it would be basically dividing a class more or less down the middle. Is that truly how it is, Mary? Can you? There would be a 3-4-5, and it would be a 6-7. Yeah.
Yes, I can see problems that arise, but there's one solution to all of it, and that's love. Do the children love the teacher they're going to stay with or the teacher they're going to go to? And I know that sounds stupid, and that nobody in modern education would ever say such a thing, but it's the truth. The children know who loves them, and they as long as that teacher loves them, you can be at what normal people would think is a bad teacher and actually be the best teacher of all, as long as you love those children and they love you.
That pretty much answers my question. Yeah, it was just, it's just, I'd just love to hear maybe a couple minutes from you. I know we've got to sign off here in a moment, but it does just seem that it's getting less and less common that teachers can stay with their class for the whole 8-year track, just given, a lot of us have family reaching in different states or different things, that come up. Way that staying with a class for that many years is less common. Is there anything kind of what you just said about as long as, that love between teacher and class is really what I feel as a teacher makes such, this huge difference. But I'm almost just thinking of anything to sort of be able to say to parents and community, just, we're kind of taught this is the ultimate way, right? But in this modern world where it's something that's happening less and less, what is that thing that we're focusing on to, be that balm that we're still doing the work here, and it might not always take that form. And I think that love is what you touched on, but just a little nugget, because I know we've got to go. That would be great.
Well, just hearing you speak made me stop thinking. You see, that's the beauty of love. That's the beauty of feelings. You stop thinking. Okay, well, I had a beautiful answer for you, but I just started concentrating about love, because that really is the answer. I mean, no matter what you do, a good teacher, it's all about, it isn't about even experience. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with love. And Steiner says this 1,000 times. So how do we deal with your situation there? Well, here's the deal. I say that it's terrible that people are told what they're told about Waldorf when it's not true. Waldorf often breaks at 5th grade, and then they have a community teach 6th, 7th, and 8th, because it's impossible for one person to do it. I haven't seen 10 teachers that have been able to teach all the way 1st through 8th grade. It's just not possible, not in our age, because the junior high curriculum is too intense. And so if they can have one teacher who is their base teacher for 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then they have other people come in to teach specialty classes who the students can respect, who they know when they're teaching that subject, that person knows that subject. It's better not to teach a subject than to have a teacher teach it who doesn't know it, because they don't, if they don't understand that their learning is what they're teaching. Because most of us teachers think it's our learning, it's all that's up here. That's what we're teaching the children. No, it has nothing to do with that. It's how we learn. That's what has to do with it. So if you keep those children, if you're going to break a class, it's a good time to break it at 5th grade, simply because that's when the children go through and catch up to cause an effect, more or less, at the 12-year change. And at that point, when you start your community, make sure you have institutions in it. People always say, how the heck do I get through 6th grade? These students are a bunch of litigious, legal Roman senators, they're just horrible. And I say, you start a court, and they elect their own judge, and they have prosecutors, and they have defenders, and they judge themselves. Don't judge them. You'll never succeed unless you've been with them from 1st grade. In 6th grade, by passing judgment on their horrible behavior sometimes, which comes out, of course, just, animalistic glandular activity. So you establish a senate, you establish a court, you establish groups where they have to work together, and that's how the solution comes. And then you could even have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, because you start doing junior achievement, you start doing entrepreneurialism, you start making sure they have student council. So they start understanding and putting and applying the things that you're teaching in terms of, the way that America works or whatever. And then once you get that core of teachers, it only takes one teacher to be the core teacher for 3 grades, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And I've seen this happen quite successfully many times.